John Matthews was a simple man. He lived in the quiet suburbs of New York City, worked as an engineer, and had no idea that his life was about to change forever. Every day, he went to work at the Advanced Communication Lab, a research facility focused on creating new technologies to connect humanity with the stars. John was proud of the work he did, but it was nothing too exciting, at least, not until the day everything went wrong. The project was meant to be groundbreaking. A machine that could send and receive messages faster than the speed of light. The world had been dreaming of instant communication with extraterrestrial civilizations, and John was part of the team that believed they could make it happen. It was supposed to be a simple test, a short message to space, but what happened instead was far from simple. John sat at his station, monitoring the equipment. The machine was working well, sending out signals into the vastness of space. He had done this 100 times before, but this time, something was different. A minor glitch in the system caused the signal to go off track, bouncing from one wavelength to another in a rapid, unpredictable pattern. John wasn't sure what happened, but he quickly hit the reset button to fix the issue. It was a small mistake, nothing to worry about, he thought. But little did he know, that single glitch would have enormous consequences. When John checked the system log, he saw that the signal had been sent. But to where? It wasn't to the nearest galaxy or even a nearby star system. It was to an unknown location. The system had picked up a strange pattern in the signal's return. This wasn't just static or random interference. It was a message, a response. And the message, it was directed at him. The message was clear but strange. In broken, almost archaic language, it read, "Marriage accepted. Queen Sarah awaits your arrival." John blinked in confusion. Marriage. What was this? He had no idea who Queen Sarah was, or what this message meant. He quickly rechecked the coordinates, trying to figure out what went wrong, but it was no use. The signal had been sent, and somehow, an alien species had interpreted his actions as a proposal for marriage. Panic began to set in. John ran through possible explanations, but nothing made sense. Was it some kind of prank? Maybe a system error? He called his supervisor, Dr. Larkin, to explain the situation. Dr. Larkin, an older man with a calm demeanor, didn't seem as worried as John felt. "John, relax," Dr. Larkin said. "Maybe it's a mistake. Let's contact the communication center and try to explain. There's no need to panic." But when they contacted the Global Communication Network, they confirmed that the message had been received by an intelligent alien civilization, and that it was no joke. They had responded seriously, and they were expecting a reply. The aliens, it seemed, had interpreted the signal as an official marriage proposal. It was then that John's heart sank. He knew what this meant. If an alien species believed that Earth had pledged to marry one of their queens, rejecting the offer could have serious consequences. The political fallout could be catastrophic, and there was no way to explain the error now. No one would believe him. John spent the next few days in a daze, unsure of what to do. It wasn't long before the situation escalated. A diplomatic envoy from the alien species, the Xalkra, arrived on Earth. They were an advanced, regal race, with towering figures and glowing blue skin. Their leader, Queen Sarah, had already decided to take John as her husband. They had prepared a grand welcome for him on their home planet, and there was no way to back out. The Xalkra considered his accidental marriage proposal to be a formal and binding agreement. John tried to explain his mistake, but the Xalkra were unmoved. They saw the message as an invitation to an alliance, an offer to join their royal family, strengthen their civilization, and perhaps help them conquer more planets. To them, the idea of rejecting a marriage proposal was unthinkable, and if John refused, the entire world could face the wrath of the Xalkra Empire. John was forced into a decision. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that refusing could have deadly consequences, not just for him, but for everyone on Earth. The thought of marrying an alien queen was ridiculous, But the thought of intergalactic war was even worse. He had no choice but to agree to travel to their planet and meet with Queen Sarah. The news of John's engagement spread quickly across the media. He became an overnight sensation, and people around the world were both shocked and fascinated by his predicament. Some mocked him, others were outraged, but the most curious thing was the way the world began to rally behind him. Everyone seemed to believe that this could be an important moment in human history, a chance to make contact with an alien race and possibly open up a new chapter for Earth. John, however, felt anything but excited. He was terrified. He had no idea what to expect when he met Queen Sarah or what the future held. His life was no longer his own. He was caught up in something much bigger than himself, and he couldn't even figure out how to fix it. The only thing he knew for sure was that his simple mistake had thrown him into an unimaginable situation, and now he was stuck. The day he was supposed to leave Earth was fast approaching, and John couldn't shake the thought that his life was about to change in ways he couldn't control. With no way out, he boarded the ship that would take him to the stars. He was about to meet a queen, an alien queen, who, for some bizarre reason, believed he was her husband. John Matthews had never imagined that one simple mistake could turn his life upside down. Just days after receiving the unexpected and utterly confusing message from the alien civilization, John found himself standing on a platform at an international spaceport, preparing to board a spaceship that would take him to an entirely new world. The thought of meeting Queen Sarah, an alien ruler, still seemed too unbelievable to grasp. How did he get here? How could his life have turned into this strange and surreal journey? The ship that would take him to the Xalcra planet was sleek, advanced, and far beyond anything Earth had ever built. The metallic surface shimmered under the bright lights of the spaceport, and its design looked more like something out of a sci-fi movie than a real spacecraft. John couldn't help but feel a strange mixture of excitement and terror. He was about to leave Earth, the only home he had ever known, and travel to a distant planet to meet the queen of a powerful alien species. He was supposed to marry her. How could this possibly be real? He stood nervously in line with the other travelers, many of whom were there for diplomatic reasons or to learn more about the Xalcra. Most of the people boarding the ship looked excited or at least prepared for the journey. But John, still in shock, felt like he was walking in a dream. The media had turned his story into an international sensation, and now everyone knew his name. Some called him a hero. Others laughed at his misfortune. But he knew the truth. This was not a choice he had made. He had never asked for this. As the time came to board, John stepped up to the spacecraft's entrance, greeted by a crew of alien beings who spoke in soft, musical tones. They wore sleek uniforms with shimmering patterns, which made them appear both elegant and mysterious. They nodded at him in recognition. John felt out of place, like a child in a world he didn't understand. The inside of the spaceship was just as alien as the outside. The walls glowed with a soft blue light, and the seating was arranged in a way that felt unfamiliar but comfortable. The air was thick with the scent of something he couldn't quite identify, and the seats seemed to conform to his body in an almost soothing way. As the ship slowly began its ascent, John gazed out the window and watched Earth shrink into the distance. He had never been so far from home before. The journey to the Xalcra homeworld took several days, and during that time, John spent most of it in quiet reflection. He tried to prepare himself for what was ahead, but nothing could have fully prepared him for the reality he was about to face. The thought of meeting Queen Sarah, someone who ruled an entire empire, seemed terrifying. What would she be like? Would she be kind, fierce, or maybe even disappointed that he wasn't the person she expected him to be? After all, he had only sent a message by mistake. This wasn't some grand romantic gesture, yet the Xalcra people seemed to have taken it that way. John spent hours reading everything he could find about the Xalcra. The information was limited, as Earth had only recently discovered their existence, but he learned enough to know that they were an ancient, advanced species with a rich history. The Xalcra were known for their beauty and their wisdom, and their empire stretched across many star systems. They were a proud people, but also highly diplomatic and respected by other civilizations in the galaxy. Their queen, Sara, was said to be both powerful and intelligent, a leader who had expanded her empire through alliances rather than conquest. If there was one thing John had learned, it was that Queen Sara was not someone to be taken lightly. By the time the ship entered the Xalcra system, John felt a strange sense of awe mixed with dread. The Xalcra homeworld appeared on the view screen, a majestic planet covered with lush, glowing forests, towering cities, and vast oceans. It was like nothing John had ever seen before. The planet seemed alive, vibrant with colors that were beyond his understanding. The sky shimmered in shades of purple and orange, with two suns casting a gentle glow over the surface. As the ship descended toward the planet's surface, John's heart pounded in his chest. He was about to land on a world where he knew no one, a world where he was expected to marry a queen he had never met. What would happen when he stepped off the ship? Would the Xalcra be welcoming? Or would they see him as an intruder, a human who had accidentally brought his people into their royal court? The ship landed gently on a large, circular platform, and the hatch opened to reveal a grand landing area. John's eyes widened as he stepped out and saw the grandeur of the city surrounding him. The architecture was unlike anything on Earth. Tall spires that seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky, structures made of shimmering crystal and stone, and streets that pulsed with an otherworldly glow. The air was fresh and smelled faintly of flowers, but there was something also strange and unfamiliar about it. The ground beneath his feet was soft, like walking on a cloud. A procession awaited him. Alien beings, tall, elegant, and glowing with an ethereal light, stood in rows, welcoming him with respectful nods and soft gestures. John felt out of place, like a tiny speck in this vast, beautiful world. But then he saw her, Queen Sara. She stood at the front of the procession, a regal figure dressed in flowing robes of deep blue and gold. Her long silver hair cascaded down her back, and her skin shimmered with an almost ethereal glow. Her eyes were a deep, penetrating violet, and her expression was both serene and powerful. She was stunning. John had never seen anyone like her. Queen Sara stepped forward and bowed her head in acknowledgement, her gaze meeting John's with a mixture of curiosity and warmth. She spoke, her voice melodic and commanding, yet kind. "Welcome, Earthling. I am Queen Sara of the Xalcra. I am pleased to finally meet the one who has pledged to be my partner." John blinked in surprise. I didn't mean to. It was a mistake," he stammered. But Queen Sara only smiled, her eyes gleaming with an understanding that sent a chill down John's spine. "The message has been received, and I believe that sometimes even mistakes lead to great things." John didn't know how to respond. He was trapped now on an alien world with no way to turn back, and as the doors to the palace opened before him, he knew his life had just taken a turn into the unknown. John stepped into the grand palace, feeling like a tiny speck in an alien world far beyond anything he had ever imagined. The architecture around him was both beautiful and intimidating, with high ceilings, glowing walls, and intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The air smelled fresh, almost sweet, and the soft hum of energy filled the space, making everything feel alive and vibrant. He had never seen anything like this before. It was as if the entire palace itself was made from a blend of technology and nature, a perfect harmony between the two. He followed Queen Sara through the hallways, trying to keep up with her elegant, fluid steps. She was a sight to behold, tall, with a presence that seemed to fill the room. Her silver hair shimmered in the soft lighting, and her violet eyes glowed with an intelligence that left John in awe. Despite his initial panic, he couldn't help but admire her beauty and the grace with which she moved. He had never met anyone like her. As they walked, John couldn't shake the feeling that he was completely out of place. He had been thrust into this situation by a simple mistake, a mistake that was now dragging him into a political and cultural storm. The thought of marrying this alien queen was still unbelievable to him. How could he, a simple engineer from Earth, be the one to marry someone as important as Queen Sara? The entire situation felt like a dream, and not in a good way. But Queen Sara didn't seem bothered by his confusion. She walked ahead with confidence, her mind clearly set on the future. She paused in front of a large set of double doors and turned to look at John. "This is the royal hall," she said, her voice calm and measured. "This is where we will begin the official proceedings of our union." John could barely breathe. His heart was racing. He was about to meet the most powerful leader on this planet. He was about to enter the royal court, a place where centuries of history and tradition had taken place. Everything about this was overwhelming. As the doors opened, John was greeted by a stunning view of a massive room. The walls were adorned with intricate carvings that depicted the history of the Xalkra people, stories of their ancestors, their battles, and their triumphs. At the far end of the room stood a large throne, made of a translucent material that seemed to glow with an inner light. It was beautiful, yet intimidating. The throne was clearly meant for a ruler, and the person who sat there commanded respect. The room was filled with alien beings, tall, graceful, and regal in appearance. They were all dressed in elaborate robes and held themselves with the dignity that came from centuries of royal tradition. Their eyes were all focused on John as he walked in, and he couldn't help but feel the weight of their gaze. He was no longer just a visitor. He was a part of something far bigger than himself. Queen Sara walked to the throne and gracefully took her seat, her eyes never leaving John. She motioned for him to approach, and though his legs felt heavy, John did as he was asked. As he walked closer, he could feel the eyes of the court on him, their silent judgment heavy in the air. He was the one who had caused all of this. He had sent a message, a mistake, and now he was here, standing before a queen and an entire empire. "John Matthews of Earth," Queen Sara began, her voice ringing out clearly in the silent hall. "You have come to us under unusual circumstances, but you have come nonetheless. We welcome you with open arms, for you are now a part of our world." John swallowed hard. He wasn't sure what he expected her to say. But this wasn't it. Was he truly a part of their world? Or was he just a pawn in a political game he didn't fully understand? "I didn't mean for any of this to happen," John said, his voice quieter than he intended. "I sent a message by mistake. I never thought it would be taken seriously." Queen Sara studied him for a moment, her violet eyes never leaving his face. Then she gave a small, understanding smile. "Sometimes, even the smallest actions can have the largest consequences," she said gently. "We, the Xalkra, believe in fate. Perhaps this union was meant to happen. Perhaps the universe has brought us together for a reason." John felt a shiver run down his spine. He didn't know whether to be comforted by her words or more terrified. He had no idea what was about to happen next, but he knew that his life was no longer his own. He was caught in a world that didn't make sense to him, surrounded by beings who seemed to speak a language of politics, power, and destiny. And at the center of it all was Queen Sara, the one person who could change everything. Before he could say anything more, one of the other Xalkra leaders stepped forward. He was tall, with sharp features and a stern expression. His robe shimmered with gold and black, marking him as a high-ranking official. He bowed slightly to Queen Sara, then turned to John. "You must understand, Earthling," the leader said, his voice cold and formal. "This marriage is not simply a matter of two individuals. It is a matter of the strength of our empire. Your union with our queen will solidify an alliance between Earth and the Xalkra. It is a powerful political move. Do not take it lightly." John nodded, though he felt his stomach twist with unease. The gravity of the situation was beginning to sink in. This wasn't just about him and Queen Sara. It was about the future of Earth, about creating a connection between their two civilizations that would change the course of history. He was being asked to marry a queen, not because of love or choice, but because of the political importance of the Union. He had no idea how to navigate this strange world, but he knew one thing: he had to survive it. The leader stepped back, and Queen Xara turned to John once again. Her gaze softened slightly, and for a moment, she seemed less like a ruler and more like a person, someone who might understand the fear and uncertainty he was feeling. "You are not alone in this, John Matthews," she said quietly. "We will learn from each other. We will build something together, and perhaps in time, you will see that this union was meant to be." John didn't know how to respond. He felt like he had no choice but to go along with it, but deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that everything was spiraling out of his control. He had come to Xalcra as a stranger, and now he was about to become a part of their royal family, whether he wanted to or not. The journey was only just beginning. John Matthews sat in the grand hall, his heart still racing from the events of the past few hours. He had just been introduced to the Xalcra royal court, a vast assembly of high-ranking leaders, diplomats, and military commanders who had gathered to witness his arrival. It was overwhelming, to say the least. He had come from a simple life on Earth, and now he was sitting in the center of a majestic alien world, surrounded by beings who were not just technologically advanced, but also deeply steeped in traditions and customs that John couldn't even begin to understand. Queen Xara had welcomed him into their court with grace, but it was clear that there were expectations that John was now part of something much larger than he had ever imagined. The court itself was a sight to behold. Tall, marble columns reaching up to a high domed ceiling covered with intricate star maps that glowed softly. The room was filled with beings, each one of them regal in their own right, wearing shimmering robes and displaying symbols of their rank. It was a mix of awe and intimidation, but John had no choice but to sit there, trying to absorb everything around him. The leaders of the Xalcra were not all human in appearance. Some had glowing skin, while others had delicate, translucent wings. Their eyes were all a deep shade of violet, much like Queen Xara's, and there was a quiet power in the way they carried themselves. They spoke in a calm, measured tone, yet there was an undeniable authority behind every word. As the evening went on, the discussions turned to the future of the Xalcra Earth Alliance. John listened, doing his best to follow the conversation, but much of it was far beyond his understanding. He was just one man from Earth. How could he possibly contribute to a matter of intergalactic politics and diplomacy? Queen Xara, seated at the head of the room, was the focal point of it all. She presided over the court with ease, listening intently to her advisors, and occasionally speaking in soft, yet powerful tones. It was evident that she was more than just a queen. She was a leader who understood the complexities of both her people and the greater universe. John couldn't help but feel both admiration and unease as he observed her from across the room. She was everything he wasn't: confident, composed, and in control of the situation. As the meeting went on, John was invited to speak. The entire room turned to him, their eyes expectant. He cleared his throat, feeling his palms sweat despite the calm atmosphere. I just want to say that I didn't come here by choice," he began, his voice slightly shaky. "It was a mistake, and I never imagined it would lead to something like this. I don't understand the politics of this alliance, or what my role is in it. I'm just an engineer from Earth." There was a moment of silence, and then Queen Xara's voice rang out, smooth and reassuring. "John, your arrival here is not just a coincidence. It is the will of the stars themselves. The message you sent, though unintended, has been interpreted as a sign. The Xalcra believe that alliances formed under unexpected circumstances often lead to the most profound and lasting bonds." John frowned, not entirely convinced. "But I didn't send the message as a proposal," he tried to explain. "It was an accident." Xara's expression softened, and she stood to address him. The room fell silent once again, her presence commanding attention. "Sometimes," she began, "the universe works in ways we cannot understand. It brings together people who would never have met otherwise. Your mistake, John, has become an opportunity, not just for the Salacra, but for Earth as well. John wasn't sure what to make of her words. Was this some kind of cosmic destiny? A mistake that had been turned into something far bigger than he could ever have imagined. He felt the weight of it all pressing on him. It was hard enough to navigate his new life in this alien world, let alone to be the supposed key to a new intergalactic alliance. The conversation shifted, and John found himself listening more than speaking. It was clear that the Salacra were excited about the potential of Earth joining their empire, and there were many discussions about what Earth could offer in terms of technology, resources, and culture. John's mind wandered. What did Earth have to offer? He was no expert in diplomacy or intergalactic trade. He was an engineer, a simple man. He had no idea what role he could possibly play in the grand plans the Salacra had in mind. But as the evening wore on, something began to change. John began to notice that there was something more to Queen Sara's words than he had initially realized. Her calm, collected demeanor was more than just a facade. There was genuine warmth in her voice when she spoke to him, a soft kindness that made him feel less like an outsider. She wasn't just playing a political game. There was a real connection beginning to form between them, though John couldn't quite figure out what it meant. Finally, the meeting came to a close, and John was escorted to his chambers in the palace. The palace itself was grander than anything he could have imagined. The rooms were spacious, with large windows that looked out over the sprawling city below. The furniture was elegant but functional, and everything seemed to be designed with an emphasis on comfort. But even though the room was luxurious, John felt a sense of loneliness that he couldn't shake. As he sat down on the soft, plush bed, his mind raced. He had come here as a stranger, someone who had accidentally set in motion an intergalactic event. But now he was something more, a symbol of Earth's potential future in the Salacra Empire. He had no idea how to navigate this strange world. He had no idea what was expected of him. But there was one thing he was sure of. He couldn't go back. His life had changed forever, and there was no way to undo the mistake that had started it all. Just as he was about to lie down, there was a knock at the door. He opened it to find a servant, one of the Salacra, standing there with a tray of food and a soft smile. "Your Majesty," the servant said, bowing slightly, "Queen Sara has requested your presence in the royal gardens. She wishes to speak with you privately." John's heart skipped a beat. What did Queen Sara want? Was she just being polite, or was there something more to their interactions? He had no answers, but he knew that his meeting with her in the royal gardens could change everything. Nervously, John followed the servant through the long, winding halls of the palace. He had no idea what awaited him, but he couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of a journey he could never have imagined. John stepped cautiously through the quiet hallways of the palace, his mind still racing from the events of the royal court. It had only been a few hours since he had arrived at the palace, and already he was beginning to feel the weight of his unexpected place in the Salacra world. Everything around him was so different, so advanced, and so foreign. He was a man from Earth, a human who had accidentally sent a message to an alien civilization, and now he was on the brink of becoming part of their royal family. He didn't know how it had all happened, but here he was. The servant who had greeted him earlier led him through the sprawling corridors, their footsteps echoing softly on the polished floors. They didn't speak, and John didn't know what to say. His mind was a whirlwind of questions. Why had Queen Sara requested his presence? What did she want to talk about? Was this just another political discussion, or was it something more personal? As they reached the end of the hallway, the servant opened a set of tall, ornate doors, revealing a breathtaking sight: the royal gardens. John had seen some beautiful landscapes in his life, but nothing could compare to this. The garden stretched out before him, a paradise of glowing plants, softly flowing streams, and trees that seemed to shimmer with an otherworldly light. The air was thick with the scent of flowers, and the soft hum of distant wildlife created a peaceful, almost magical atmosphere. The garden was vast, with paths leading to secluded corners, fountains sparkling in the moonlight, and benches where one could sit and take in the beauty of it all. At the center of the garden, near a large fountain, stood Queen Xara. She looked serene as always, her silver hair flowing in the soft breeze, and her violet eyes glowing in the dim light. She was dressed in a flowing gown that shimmered like the stars themselves, and she appeared to be lost in thought as she gazed out over the garden. John hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach her. But before he could move, Queen Xara turned to him, her expression softening into a welcoming smile. "John," she said in her calm, melodic voice, "I'm glad you could join me here. The gardens are a place of peace for us Xalcra. I wanted to speak with you away from the formalities of the court, to give you a chance to ask questions or express any concerns you might have." John felt a wave of relief. At least this conversation wasn't going to be about politics or alliances. Queen Xara seemed to sense his unease, and her tone was gentle and understanding. She stepped closer to him, and her presence was calming. I didn't know what to expect when I arrived," John admitted, looking around at the garden in awe. "This place is incredible. Everything is so different from Earth." Queen Xara nodded, her eyes thoughtful. "We are an ancient civilization, John. We've had time to perfect the balance between nature and technology. Our world is not just a place for us to live, but a place to thrive. We believe that our environment is as much a part of us as we are a part of it." John wasn't sure what to say to that, but he was beginning to understand the kind of people the Xalcra were. They didn't seem interested in conquest or war. They seemed to value harmony and connection, both with their planet and with other species. "I've been trying to understand my role here," John said after a pause, looking down at his hands. "I never expected any of this to happen. I never meant to cause all of this." Queen Xara's gaze softened as she stepped closer, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "I know you didn't mean for this to happen, but sometimes the universe has a way of guiding us toward things we are meant to do, even if we don't understand it at the time. The message you sent, it was a catalyst. It has brought us together, John. And perhaps in time, you will see that this is where you are meant to be." John looked up at her, his heart pounding in his chest. Was this it? Was this the moment where everything would finally make sense? Could he really accept this fate? It all felt so overwhelming. And yet, as he looked into Queen Xara's violet eyes, he couldn't deny the strange sense of connection he felt to her. She was a queen, a leader of an entire civilization, but she also seemed like someone who truly understood what it was like to be uncertain and lost. "I don't know what's going to happen next," John said quietly, his voice full of uncertainty. "I don't know if I can live up to, well, whatever expectations everyone has for me." Queen Xara smiled again, and this time there was a warmth in her expression that made John feel less like a stranger in a foreign land. She took a deep breath, as if preparing for something important to say. "John," she said gently, "there are no expectations here. Not from me, and not from the people of the Xalcra. You have been brought here, yes, but what happens next is not about fulfilling some grand destiny. It's about what you and I choose to do together. We can shape the future, not because of some mistake, but because of the bond we will create." John swallowed, feeling the weight of her words sink in. A bond. That was what this was about. It wasn't just about politics or an alliance. It was about the connection between two people from different worlds. Two people who had been brought together by chance, but who could choose their own path moving forward. "But what about Earth?" John asked, his voice filled with concern. "What happens to my home, to my people? If I'm here, how does that affect everything back on Earth?" Queen Xara's expression turned serious, and she stepped back slightly, her eyes never leaving his. "The Xalcra have no desire to conquer or control Earth," she said firmly. "What we seek is partnership. We wish to share knowledge, to trade, to help Earth evolve and grow. But it must be a mutual understanding. We cannot simply impose our will. That is not how we operate. John nodded slowly, beginning to understand. This wasn't about domination. It was about cooperation. Still, there was a lingering doubt in his mind. And if I can't live up to what everyone expects from me? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Queen Sarah stepped forward again, her hand gently resting on his arm. John, no one expects perfection. We simply ask for trust. Trust in me, and trust in what we can build together. The path ahead will not always be easy, but I promise you, you are not alone. John looked into her eyes, feeling something stir deep inside him. Was it possible that he could really find a way to belong here? Could he truly make a difference in this vast alien world? I'm scared, he admitted, the words slipping out before he could stop them. I'm scared that I don't belong here. Queen Sarah smiled softly, her eyes full of understanding. You do belong here, John, and together we will find our way. For the first time since arriving on the Salcro world, John felt a small sense of peace. There was no clear answer to everything, but maybe that was okay. The future was uncertain, but he knew one thing for sure. He wasn't facing it alone. And for now, that was enough. As they stood together in the royal gardens, the soft glow of the stars above, John couldn't help but feel that perhaps, just perhaps, this strange, unexpected journey was leading him to something greater than he had ever imagined. The days following his conversation in the royal gardens felt like a blur to John. He had spent most of his time adjusting to his new life among the Salcra, trying to learn their ways, their customs, and their language. It was no small task. Everything from their manner of speaking to their advanced technology was alien to him. But there was one thing that seemed to make everything easier. Queen Sarah. Her presence was a constant source of comfort, and as the days passed, their bond seemed to grow stronger. John had always been a practical man, focused on logic and reasoning, but the more time he spent with Tara, the more he began to feel that there were things in life that couldn't be explained by logic alone. She had a way of looking at the world, looking at him, that made him feel like he was part of something bigger than himself. Every conversation they shared, whether about the future of Earth or just casual talks about their different worlds, seemed to bring them closer. It wasn't just Sarah's wisdom and grace that John admired, though. There was something about her that made him feel safe, as if she understood him in a way no one ever had. It wasn't long before he found himself looking forward to their meetings, to the quiet moments they spent together. He never expected to feel this way, especially not in a situation like this. One afternoon, after a particularly long meeting with Salcra diplomats, John found himself walking along the palace grounds, trying to clear his mind. The air was crisp, and the palace gardens stretched out before him, with their exotic plants and peaceful streams. He had come to appreciate the calm beauty of this world, but today he couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change. It was then that he spotted Sarah standing near a fountain, her back to him as she gazed out across the landscape. She was alone, something rare for someone of her rank. Without thinking, John made his way toward her, the soft crunch of his footsteps barely audible over the hum of the distant wildlife. "Your Majesty," John called softly as he approached, unsure of what to say. He had been trying to figure out his place here, but the more time he spent with her, the more complicated his feelings became. Sarah turned slowly, her violet eyes meeting his, and her face softened in recognition. She smiled, and for a moment, John felt as if the rest of the world had faded away. "John," she said, her voice warm and gentle, "I wasn't expecting you. Is something on your mind?" John hesitated, feeling a mix of emotions swirling inside him. He had been carrying a lot of uncertainty lately, and he wasn't sure whether it was the right time to voice his concerns. But Sarah had a way of making him feel at ease, even in the most complicated of moments. "I don't know what's happening to me," John admitted, his voice tinged with frustration. "I came here thinking I was just an engineer, someone who made a simple mistake. But now, it feels like everything has changed. I don't know how to be part of this world. I don't even know how to be part of this. He gestured vaguely between them, unsure how to put his feelings into words. Zara's expression softened, and she stepped closer to him, her presence comforting. She reached out and placed a hand on his arm, her touch light but steady. "John," she began, "what you are feeling is completely normal. This is not just a change for you, but for both of us. You've entered a world unlike anything you knew. And I." She paused, as if considering her words carefully. "I have also changed in the process. Since your arrival, my perspective has shifted. I believe that fate has brought us together, and we have a chance to create something new, something that transcends the politics and alliances." John looked into her eyes, her words resonating deeply with him. She wasn't just a queen. She was someone who, like him, was trying to understand what had been set in motion. And as much as it scared him, he realized he was no longer alone in this. He had someone who cared, someone who saw him not as an outsider, but as a partner. "I didn't expect any of this," John said, his voice quieter now. "I thought I'd just be helping Earth, if I could even do that. But I don't know how to do any of it. I'm not a leader, Sarah. I'm just a man who made a mistake." Sarah smiled softly, squeezing his arm. "Sometimes, the greatest leaders are those who do not seek power. You've already shown something far more important than leadership: humility and the desire to learn. Those are the qualities that will allow us to build something real, John. Together." John didn't know what to say. He had always prided himself on being independent, on solving problems with his own two hands. But now, in this alien world, he was being asked to trust not only in himself, but in someone else. Someone who had lived a lifetime of experiences far beyond his own. And yet, here he was, drawn to her, wanting to believe that there was something worth fighting for in this new chapter of his life. For a long moment, they simply stood there, side by side, looking out over the gardens in silence. John felt a sense of peace settle over him, something he hadn't felt since arriving on the Salcra homeworld. Maybe he wasn't meant to solve everything alone. Maybe this partnership, this bond with Sarah, was what he needed all along. "Are you ready, John?" Sarah asked after a while, breaking the silence with a soft question. "Ready for what?" he asked, slightly confused. "To take the next step," she replied, her voice gentle but firm. "The Salcra are beginning to look to you as a symbol of unity between our two worlds. It's a responsibility, yes, but it's also an opportunity. We have a chance to forge a future that none of us could achieve alone. Together, we can create something greater than the sum of our parts." John nodded slowly, the weight of her words settling on him. He had never imagined that his simple mistake would lead to something so important. But now that he was here, standing beside her, he realized that maybe he was ready, not just for the responsibilities of the Salcra, but for the chance to build something lasting with Tara, to find a way forward, hand in hand. "Together," he repeated softly, more to himself than to her as he met her gaze. Zara's smile widened, and she gave a small nod, as if acknowledging something unspoken between them. Together. And as the sun began to set over the royal gardens, casting a golden glow over the two of them, John knew that this was just the beginning. There was a long road ahead, full of challenges, doubts, and decisions, but for the first time since his arrival, he felt a sense of purpose. He wasn't alone anymore. He had Sarah by his side, and together, they would navigate whatever came next. The days after their conversation in the royal gardens passed by quickly. John had found himself slowly accepting his new role in the Salcra world. He had spent countless hours studying their language, culture, and history, with Chara as his guide. The more he learned, the more he realized just how different their civilization was from Earth's. And yet, there were similarities too. A deep respect for life, the desire for peace, and the need for connection. It was becoming clearer to him why fate had brought him here. Sarah had kept her promise to him. She helped him every step of the way, whether it was through practical lessons in Salcra customs or more philosophical talks about leadership and unity. As time went on, John started to feel a sense of purpose. He was no longer just a man from Earth who made a mistake. He was now an ambassador, a bridge between two worlds. Still, the challenges were not over. The Salcra court had been watching John closely. As much as they had accepted him, they were also eager to see if he could truly fit into their society and contribute to the future they hoped to build. John knew that he had to prove himself, not just to the people of the Salcra, but also to himself. One evening, as the two of them walked along a path in the palace gardens, John felt a weight on his chest. He had been working tirelessly, learning everything he could, but there was still so much he didn't know. Would the Salcra ever truly accept him? Would Earth accept him when he returned? Sarah seemed to sense his unease. She walked beside him quietly for a moment before speaking. "You look troubled," she said, her voice soft but concerned. "What's on your mind?" John stopped and looked at her, his thoughts heavy. "I don't know if I'm ready. There's so much at stake, and I feel like I'm just waiting for something to happen, for some sign that I'm doing the right thing. What if I fail?" Sarah took a step closer, her eyes steady as she looked at him. "John, no one has ever asked you to be perfect. What matters is that you are doing your best. The bond between us, between Earth and the Salcra, isn't built on perfection. It's built on trust, on mutual understanding, and on the belief that we can grow together." John thought about her words carefully. He wasn't alone in this. The Salcra had put their trust in him, and he had learned to trust them as well. He still didn't have all the answers, but perhaps that was okay. Maybe it wasn't about knowing everything all at once. Maybe it was about taking things one step at a time. "I guess I'm just scared of making a mistake," he admitted quietly. Zara smiled warmly and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Mistakes are part of the journey, John. We all make them, even I, but it's how we learn from them that matters. You've already shown your courage by stepping into the unknown, and that more than anything will guide us." Her words were a balm to his troubled mind, and John found himself feeling a sense of calm wash over him. The fear he had been carrying seemed a little lighter now. He had a purpose, and he had people who believed in him. Over the next few days, the pace of life in the palace picked up. John was asked to participate in more meetings with Salcra officials, discussing trade agreements, mutual defense, and the sharing of technology. These were serious discussions, and John had to be sharp. He spent hours poring over documents, studying Salcra strategies, and learning how to navigate their intricate political landscape. It was difficult, but it was also empowering. For the first time in a long while, John felt like he was truly contributing. Then one morning, as he prepared for another important meeting with the Salcra leaders, Sarah approached him with a sense of urgency in her step. "John," she said, her voice serious, "we've just received troubling news. There's a faction among the Salcra who doesn't believe in the partnership with Earth. They believe that bringing your people into our fold is a risk, that it will compromise our way of life. They'd been growing more vocal, and some of them are now planning to take action." John felt a chill run through him. This was the moment he had feared, the moment when everything could fall apart. A division among the Salcra was something he hadn't anticipated, but it seemed inevitable. Whenever new alliances were formed, there were always those who resisted change. "What can we do?" John asked, his voice steady despite the storm of thoughts in his mind. Zara's expression was one of resolve. "We need to show them that the partnership is not a threat, but an opportunity. We need to unite the Salcra and prove that Earth and our people can coexist, that we can help each other grow. But I can't do this alone, John. You have to stand with me." John's heart raced as he realized the gravity of the situation. This wasn't just about learning their language or understanding their culture. This was about taking a stand for something he believed in, something greater than himself. He had to be the bridge, not just between worlds, but between people who were divided. "Then I'll stand with you," John said, determination filling his voice. "We can show them what we're capable of together." Zara's eyes softened with gratitude. "I knew I could count on you." The next few days were tense as the court prepared for a critical meeting. John and Sarah worked closely together, gathering supporters and preparing a speech that would appeal to both the hearts and minds of the Xalcra people. It wasn't just about presenting facts. It was about telling a story of unity, of two worlds coming together for a brighter future. On the day of the meeting, the atmosphere in the palace was thick with anticipation. The council chambers were filled with Xalcra leaders, diplomats, and influential figures, all awaiting the address. John stood beside Sarah, his heart pounding in his chest, but he felt a steady calm settle over him as he looked at her. She gave him a reassuring nod, and he knew that, no matter what happened, they would face it together. When Sarah stepped forward to speak, the room fell silent. She began by acknowledging the concerns of the dissenting faction, but then she spoke of the potential for change, for growth, and for collaboration. She spoke of the hope that this partnership between Earth and the Xalcra could create something new, something neither of their worlds could achieve alone. Finally, it was John's turn. He had never been one for speeches, but as he stood before the assembly, he realized that this wasn't just a speech. It was a chance to change the future. He spoke from his heart, telling them about his experiences on Earth, his journey to the Xalcra world, and the trust he had come to place in Sarah and the Xalcra people. He spoke of the mistakes he had made, but also of the lessons he had learned. He spoke of unity, not just between two planets, but between all people, all species. It wasn't just about politics or alliances. It was about building something better for everyone. When the speech ended, there was a moment of silence. The air was thick with anticipation, and for a moment, John wondered if they had done enough. Then, slowly, the room erupted in applause. The dissenting faction, though still wary, had been swayed. It was not a complete victory, but it was a start. As Sarah and John left the council chambers, John turned to her, a smile tugging at his lips. "I think we just made a difference." Sarah smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "Together, we did." For the first time since arriving on the Xalcra world, John felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he was no longer afraid. He had found his place, and he knew that, whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them with the people he had come to call family. And for the first time in a long while, John believed that a new beginning had truly begun.